Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I want you to stick around for this one because it's a story about a lesson that was long overdue. My son took my bedroom, the one I had shared with his mother for 30 years, looked me in the eye, and told me, "It's ours now." He actually said those words. He and his wife thought they were taking a room. They thought they were upgrading their living space at my expense. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend in their bubble of entitlement, was that they weren't just taking a room. They were throwing away their entire future, a future I had painstakingly and silently built for them. They had no idea what I was about to do next, but they were about to learn that my kindness, which they had mistaken for weakness, had a very definite and very final limit. It all started, as these things often do, with a simple request. My son, Kevin, and his wife of 2 years, Jessica, were having some financial trouble. At least, that's what they told me. Their landlord was selling their apartment building, and they needed a place to stay for a few months while they saved up for a down payment on a house of their own. A few months. That was the agreement. I'm a widower. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago, and this house, our house, felt cavernously empty. The thought of having some life and laughter within these walls again was appealing. I said yes immediately. Of course, you can stay with me, I told them. Family helps family. That's what I believed. That's what Eleanor and I had always taught our son. The first month was fine. They were grateful, or at least they performed gratitude convincingly. They helped with groceries, they kept their guest room tidy, and we'd have dinner together a few nights a week. But slowly, a change began to creep in. It was subtle at first. Jessica started redecorating the living room, replacing photos of Eleanor and me with their own wedding pictures and modern, sterile art that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. When I gently mentioned that a particular photo of my late wife was special to me, Jessica just smiled that tight, polite smile of hers and said, "Oh, we're just freshening the place up a bit, giving it a more modern vibe. It's for the best." Kevin just nodded along, completely oblivious, or perhaps complicit. My house was no longer my house. It was a place that needed freshening up. Then came the financial creep. The contributions to groceries stopped. I come home from my part-time consulting work, a little something I did to keep my mind sharp, and find receipts on the counter for expensive organic markets and boutique wine shops, all purchased with a supplementary credit card I'd given Kevin for gas and emergencies. Dinners together became them complaining about my cooking. "A little bland, Dad," Kevin would say, pushing his plate away. Jessica is used to more complex flavors. I started eating alone in the kitchen, just to avoid the criticism. They took over the television every night, watching loud reality shows that gave me a headache. I would retreat to my bedroom, my sanctuary, with a book. It felt less like I was sharing my home and more like I was a live-in landlord who had lost control of his property. The final straw, the act of disrespect so profound it fundamentally changed me, happened on a Tuesday. I had been on a 2-day consulting trip, a rare overnight project. I came home tired, looking forward to a hot shower and sleeping in my own bed, the one Eleanor and I had picked out together. I walked up the stairs, pushed open my bedroom door, and stopped dead. Everything was gone. My heavy oak dresser, my bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks, the armchair where I read every night, all of it gone. The walls were painted a sterile gray. A massive, modern bed with a gaudy silver headboard dominated the room. Jessica's vanity table was set up where my dresser used to be, littered with 100 tiny bottles and jars. My clothes had been hastily thrown into cardboard boxes and shoved into the small guest room down the hall, which was now my designated space. I stood there in the doorway, my heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and a deep, gut-wrenching hurt. Kevin and Jessica came out of the room, beaming. "Surprise," Jessica chirped, clapping her hands together. "What do you think? It's so much bigger and has the en-suite. It just made sense for us to have this room." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of understanding, of remorse. I found none. "Kevin," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what is this?" "This is my room," he shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that broke my heart more than the act itself. "Come on, Dad. You're just one person. We're a couple. We're trying to start a family. We need the space. It's ours now." You can have a guest room. It's cozy. It's ours now." Those 3 words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence. They weren't asking. They were telling. They hadn't just moved my things. They had usurped my life, my memories, my space. They had relegated me to the status of a tenant in the home I had built, in the room where I had held my dying wife's hand. The hurt was so intense it felt like a physical blow. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just looked at them, at their smiling, expectant faces, and something inside me went cold. The grief and sadness I felt began to crystallize into something else, something hard and clear. Resolve. I turned without a word, walked down the hall to the cramped guest room, and shut the door. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, surrounded by the boxed-up remnants of my life, and I planned. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was now fuel. They thought I was a weak, sentimental old man they could push around. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten that this was my house, and I was about to give them a very thorough and very permanent reminder. What my son and his wife never bothered to learn about me is that I didn't just work a simple 9 to 5 my whole life. After Eleanor got sick, I retired from my engineering job to care for her. After she passed, the silence in the house was deafening. To keep my mind occupied, I started a business, an online consulting firm for specialized manufacturing processes. It was my old field, but I found a niche, a global one. It started as a hobby, something to fill the lonely hours. But it grew, and it grew fast. I was good at it. Very good. Over 5 years, I had built a multi-million-dollar company from the spare bedroom, the very room I was now exiled to. I never told Kevin. I never flashed the money. I lived simply. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. I wore the same comfortable clothes. I wanted him to make his own way in the world, to learn the value of hard work. I gave him a good education, helped him with a down payment on his first car, and was always there for him. I thought I was teaching him independence. Instead, I had created a monster of entitlement, one who saw my simple lifestyle not as a choice, but as a limitation. He and Jessica saw me as a retired old man living on a modest pension, a soft touch with a big, empty house they could colonize. They were about to discover how profoundly they had miscalculated. The first call I made the next morning was to my lawyer, Sarah. I've known her for 20 years. She handled my will and Eleanor's estate. She's sharp, efficient, and completely unsentimental when it comes to business. I explained the situation, my voice calm and even. I left out the emotional details. She didn't need them. I just stated the facts. My son and his wife, who were staying as guests, had moved me from my room and declared it their own. I needed them out. "An eviction notice, Tom?" she asked, a note of surprise in her voice. "Are you sure? For your son?" "Perfectly sure, Sarah," I replied, looking at a box labeled bedside table contents. "I want it done by the book. 30-day notice, served by a professional process server. No wiggle room, no emotional appeals. This is a legal matter now." I could almost hear her smile through the phone. "Consider it done," she said. That was step 1, the house. The foundation of their world was about to crack. Step 2 was the car. Kevin drove a beautiful, late-model SUV. He was very proud of it. He'd post pictures of it online, captioning them with hashtags like "hardware pays off." The truth was, I paid for it. It was a college graduation gift. But I was clever. I told him that for insurance purposes, it was better to keep the car in my name for a few years. He didn't question it. He just wanted the keys. So the title, the registration, the insurance, all of it was in my name. I was the legal owner. He was just the permitted driver. I made my second call of the day to my insurance company. I calmly explained that I needed to remove 2 drivers, Kevin and Jessica, from my policy, effective immediately. Then, I called a local towing company and arranged for a flatbed to be on standby. The moment I got confirmation the insurance was canceled, I would report the vehicle as being operated without my consent by an uninsured driver. It would be impounded, and from the impound lot, I, the legal owner, would have it towed to my own garage. His symbol of success was about to vanish. Step 3 was the money. This one was more direct. When Kevin and Jessica got married, I set up a joint savings account with him. I put a substantial amount of money in it, $50,000, and told him it was an emergency fund. For a medical crisis, a job loss, a real-life catastrophe. For the first year, they didn't touch it, but I had been monitoring it online. In the last 6 months, they had been dipping into it. A weekend trip to a fancy resort, a $500 dinner, a designer handbag for Jessica. They had chipped away nearly $15,000. They thought I didn't notice. I logged in my bank's website. I transferred the remaining $35,000, plus every other cent, to a new account solely in my name. I left exactly $1 in the joint account. Then, I called the credit card company and reported the supplementary card I'd given Kevin as lost and had it canceled immediately. The river of free money had just dried up completely. Step 4 was the most devastating. It was the keystone of their entire lifestyle. Kevin worked as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech firm called Innovate Solutions. He earned a decent salary, one that afforded them their nights out and expensive tastes, but not their life in my house with my car and my money. He was proud of his job. He thought he'd earned it through his own brilliance. He hadn't. I owned 70% of Innovate Solutions. I was the silent majority partner who had funded its creation years ago. The CEO, a man named David, was an old and trusted friend. I had called David and asked him to give Kevin a job, to give him a chance to build a career. David had agreed, but had privately confessed to me over the years that Kevin was a mediocre employee at best. He was lazy, he took credit for others' work, and his results were consistently underwhelming. He kept his job only because of my request. I called David. I told him the grace period was over. David, I said, I'm calling in that favor. I want you to start managing Kevin based on performance and performance alone. Document everything. His late arrivals, his missed deadlines, his long lunches. Hold him to the same standard as every other employee. The moment you have cause, verifiable, undeniable cause, I want you to terminate his employment. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tom, I can tell you right now, that won't take long. He's been skating on thin ice for a year. Consider it handled. The final safety net, the one they didn't even know existed, was about to be cut. I hung up the phone. It was done. The house, the car, the money, the job. In the span of a few hours, I had systematically dismantled the entire framework of their entitled lives. Now all I had to do was wait and watch. The first domino fell 3 days later. A crisp, legal-looking envelope arrived via courier. Jessica signed for it, laughing as she brought it into the kitchen where I was quietly drinking my coffee. Look at this, Kevin, she said, waving in the air. Your dad's got a sense of humor. He sent us a fake eviction notice. Kevin read it, his smile faltering. Dad, what is this? This looks real. I didn't look up from my newspaper. It is real, I said calmly. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. His face went from confusion to outrage. You can't be serious. Over a bedroom? We're your family. This is my house, I said, finally meeting his gaze. My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion he expected. And you are tenants who have outstayed your welcome. The law is quite clear. They stormed off to my bedroom, slamming the door. I could hear their raised voices, their disbelief. They still thought it was a tactic, a bluff from a grumpy old man. They had no idea it was just the beginning. A week later, the second domino wobbled. They went out for a celebratory dinner. I overheard them talking about it. Jessica had gotten a small promotion, and they were going to their favorite expensive steakhouse. They were putting on a brave face, acting as if my eviction notice was a joke they were choosing to ignore. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Kevin. Dad, this is so embarrassing. Your credit card got declined. His voice was a strained whisper. The one I gave you for emergencies? I asked, feigning ignorance. Yes. The waiter looked at us like we were criminals. Can you call the company and sort it out? I'm afraid I can't, son, I said, my tone still placid. I canceled that card. It was being used for non-emergencies, so I assumed it was no longer needed. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with dawning horror. How are we supposed to pay for this? He stammered. I don't know, Kevin, I replied. I guess you'll have to figure that out. I hung up. I later learned from a mutual friend that they had to leave Jessica's new watch as collateral and come back the next day with cash. The humiliation was palpable. The very next day, the third, much larger domino crashed down. Jessica went to a boutique to buy a dress, and her debit card was declined. She called Kevin in a panic. He logged into their mobile banking app to check the balance on their emergency account. He called me, and this time, there was no pretense of calm. He was screaming, "The money, it's gone. The whole account is empty. Did you get hacked? Did we get robbed?" "No, Kevin," I said, walking out to my garden and inspecting a rose bush. "I moved the money. It was my money, after all. I put it in an account that you can't access, but why?" he shrieked. "We needed that. That was our safety net." "A safety net is for falling," I said, snipping a dead bloom from the bush. "Not for funding a lifestyle you haven't earned. You treated it like a bonus, not a lifeline. The lifeline has been withdrawn." The atmosphere in the house grew toxic. They stopped speaking to me, communicating only through glares and muttered insults as they passed me in the hallway. They were trapped. With no savings and no credit, they couldn't afford a deposit on a new apartment. They were stuck here in my house, counting down the days on the eviction notice they now knew was deadly serious. Their panic was a visible thing, a cloud of frantic energy that filled the rooms. They spent hours on the phone with rental agencies, their voices growing more desperate with each call. They didn't have the required credit score. They didn't have the first and last month's rent. Their world was shrinking, and they were starting to realize it. The final, catastrophic domino fell a week before they were due to leave. Kevin got pulled over for a broken taillight, a minor infraction. The police officer ran his license and registration. The officer returned to the window, his expression grim. He informed Kevin that the vehicle had no valid insurance and that he was therefore driving illegally. Despite Kevin's frantic protest that it had to be a mistake, the officer was unmoved. The beautiful SUV, their status symbol, was impounded on the spot. Kevin and Jessica had to take a taxi home. The next morning, following the plan I had laid out, I took a cab to the impound lot with my title and proof of ownership. I paid the fees and had the SUV towed directly to a private garage I rented downtown. When Kevin called the lot to try and retrieve it, he was informed that the registered owner had already claimed the vehicle. His desperate, furious call to me went straight to my voicemail. I was busy cleaning out the garage at my house, making space for my old sedan to be parked inside again. In that final week, the fight went out of them. They were defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. Kevin even started getting calls from his boss, David. His performance was suddenly under a microscope. He was being asked to justify his expense reports to account for his time. The pressure was mounting, and he was cracking. They tried to apologize once. They found me in the kitchen and delivered a stilted, insincere speech about how they misunderstood and were sorry for the miscommunication. It was a desperate, transactional apology, an attempt to get the benefits turned back on. I just looked at them and said, "Actions have consequences. You have 7 days left." The last day arrived. It was a Saturday. I woke up early and made myself a proper breakfast. They hadn't packed a single box. I think, even then, a part of them believed I would relent at the last minute, that I would see their sad faces and my fatherly instincts would kick in and I'd say, "All right, you've learned your lesson." They had learned nothing. Around noon, they confronted me in the living room. The one Jessica had freshened up, Kevin stood in front of me, his arms crossed, trying to project an authority he no longer had. Jessica stood behind him, tears streaming down her face. It was their final stand. "You can't do this," Kevin said, his voice trembling with rage. "You can't just throw us out on the street. We're your family. What are we supposed to do?" I had been waiting for this moment. I calmly picked up a manila folder from the coffee table and opened it. I slid a document across the table. "This," I said, my voice steady and clear, "is the deed to this house. As you can see, my name is the only one on it. This is my house. In 2 hours, when the eviction notice expires, you will be trespassing." I slid another document across. "This is the title to the SUV you were driving. My name. It is my car. It is currently parked securely in a garage that you do not have access to." I then pulled out a stack of printed bank and credit card statements. "And this," I said, fanning them out, is a record of the emergency fund you spent on five-star hotels, designer clothes, and $1,000 electronics. My money. You didn't earn it, and you certainly didn't deserve it. Kevin's face was pale, his jaw slack. Jessica was openly sobbing now. But I wasn't finished. This was the final lesson. There's one more thing, Kevin, I said, looking him directly in the eye. Your job. He looked confused, a flicker of fear in his eyes. What about my job? You work at Innovate Solutions, I said. A company I founded and am the silent majority owner of. Your boss, David, is a very old friend of mine. You didn't get that job because you were qualified, son. You got it because I asked David to give my boy a chance. And for years, you have been lazy, unproductive, and have taken that opportunity for granted. David and I spoke this morning. In light of your documented poor performance and your frankly unprofessional conduct, your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. The sound that came out of Kevin's mouth was a strangled gasp. It was the sound of a man whose entire world had just been obliterated. The house, the car, the money, and now the job. The four pillars of his entitled existence, all gone. He sank onto the sofa, utterly broken. Jessica just stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. The full scope of their miscalculation had finally crashed down upon them. They hadn't just disrespected a lonely old man. They had bitten the hand that had, secretly and unconditionally, fed them their entire adult lives. I stood up. A friend of yours is coming with a truck in 1 hour to pick you up. You may take your clothes, your personal effects, and anything you personally paid for. Nothing else. The keys to this house will be left on the kitchen counter. I walked out of the room, leaving them amidst the ruins of their life. An hour later, I watched from the upstairs window as they loaded their few boxes into a friend's beat-up pickup truck. They looked small and lost. There was no anger left, only a profound, crushing shame. They drove away without looking back. That evening, I walked in my master bedroom. I had spent the afternoon moving all my old furniture back into place. My armchair was in its corner, my books were on the shelf, and a framed picture of Eleanor was on my bedside table. The room felt right again. It felt like home. My home. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces about them through the family grapevine. They were living in a tiny, one-bedroom apartment across town. Kevin was working at a big-box hardware store, and Jessica was a waitress. They were struggling, really struggling, for the first time in their lives. I felt no satisfaction in their hardship, but I felt no guilt either. I felt a quiet, profound peace. I had given my son every advantage, every safety net. He hadn't just taken it for granted. He had seen it as his due. He learned, the hard way, that respect is the currency of family, and that when you bankrupt that respect, the consequences are absolute. Kindness is not a weakness. Generosity is not an open invitation for disrespect. And a home is not just a building. It's a sanctuary built on love and mutual respect. They tried to take my sanctuary, and in the end, they lost everything. They learned their lesson, and I got my peace back. I think Eleanor would have understood. So, let me know what you think in the comments. Did I go too far, or was this a case of just desserts? I'm interested to hear your perspective. Thanks for listening to my story, and if you want to hear more tales of life lessons and poetic justice, make sure you subscribe.